Hello, everyone. Welcome to another conversation with Playwrite Foundation. And this time it's cricket. And we have former New Zealand opening batsman and captain Glenn Turner. Glenn, welcome to the show.
Thank you, and namaste to you. Kihale.
Namaste, Glenn. Change bale, chardi kala. That's the wonderful question from you. And the typical response from me is that everything's balle balle, even though we've been down in the dumps as a country. I trust that Sukhi ma'am is doing well and New Zealand is a safe and healthy place at the moment.
Yes, we've been very fortunate, and I suppose our location has assisted us greatly. Being an island tucked away down at the bottom of planet Earth has its advantages at moments like these.
That's true. And I hope your golf and your hiking and your other activities have been on and you're enjoying those.
Yes, there's just been no restrictions for quite a long time. And particularly in the South Island, if we've had any re-emergence of COVID, it tends to have been in or around the Auckland area, which of course is our largest population, I suppose. So no, I played golf today, I must admit, and I keep telling people that I don't let my game spoil a good walk.
I love that quote anyway. And I haven't started playing golf, still playing a bit of cricket and a bit of tennis. So I like to think that I can run rather than walk. But I want to also mention that probably playing golf is a bit easier than facing the fastest bowlers in the world as an opening batsman.
Well, I would just question that slightly. I find with a stationary ball, it's far more difficult to overcome it than a ball traveling at you at 145 Ks, where you can deflect it and use the pace of the ball. Yeah. But I wouldn't like to try it now, put it that way, not with obviously with one's eyesight and reflections, not as they were. So no, it's a leisurely game, I suppose, but a nice walk anyway around the golf course.
That's right. And I remember you in county cricket and for New Zealand being a very, at times, very aggressive batsman and at times very obdurate and very, very technically, obviously, very correct and brilliant career. We're proud to have you for Playwright once again. I'm going to dive deep into our first part of the discussion now, Glenn, and that is related to your views and a recent article that you wrote on the state of cricket and the fact that it's become a little too much pajama cricket and there's too much of commercialization. There's too much cricket happening anyway across the world and international cricketers get no rest to recuperate. And the wrong decisions seem to be taken at the moment with respect to what is the priority. Test cricket, one-day cricket, T20 cricket, or just the leagues where you don't even represent your country. So, Glenn, give us an overview on your thoughts and what is the way forward, if at all.
Well, I think the soul of the game at the moment has been put on hold. And there's a big money grab going at the moment. And unfortunately, those administering the game have given in to that as a priority. And of course, the players' temptation to go along with that has come through as well. And it's obvious to say that 20 over cricket seems to have more importance than test cricket, even though the players themselves would admit that they would far sooner play test cricket than the much shorter version. But yeah, it's very disappointing to see it actually. And what the answers are to that, I thought COVID may help, and it may still, because people now are working more from home than they did. I remember going back 20 odd years when society was talking about having more leisure time, and with automation coming in, that would allow that sort of thing. So more time, if you like, to smell the roses and to go along and watch 5 days of test cricket. But what we've seen in society, of course, is that people often have to take up 2 jobs to make ends meet, and with money taking over and the cost of living increasing, etc., it's forced us down a path, or helped to force us down a path of playing shorter versions of the game because people don't seem to have the time. So I think that, I think a lot of things are being said around the world now about a reset. And certainly I'd like to see a reset when it comes to bringing back the soul of the game of cricket.
Absolutely, Glenn. Well said. And in your time, even later years, Test cricket was paramount. And you rightly said, I interact with a lot of top level cricketers of today as well as yesteryears. They all love Test cricket. They want to prove themselves at the level of Test cricket if they can. Many know that they may not be able to ever play Tests for their country, and therefore they make do with, if I can say so, with the limited overs version, and they try to excel there for their country. But there are several now who have retired, so to say, from international cricket, but they're playing about 5 or 6 leagues around the world. And Chris Gayle, for example, hasn't really retired from international cricket and is likely to play the T20 World Cup. But he's been playing the pajama leagues all over, even in Bangladesh and everywhere, for several years now. AB de Villiers has stopped playing for South Africa. He plays the IPL. I think Faf du Plessis as well is another example. So what are your views on that?
Well, it's that temptation, isn't it? I mean, if you can go into a league like the IPL and earn, we saw one of our lads, Jameson, being offered 2.8 million New Zealand dollars. Sure, he has to play all the games to get them and so on. And you have others who are, even someone who's maybe at the retirement age or getting close to it, if they can earn around $1 million over a 6-week period, playing about 14 matches, and they open the bowling and don't have to bowl more than 4 overs, and they can do that even in 4 spells, and then you bat middle order, then you might come in and face a dozen balls if you're lucky, and you're playing only 2 games a week. I mean, I suppose you'd say the temptation is just too great not to do that. But isn't that sad that it's been allowed to reach the level that it has?
You know, Glenn, also the fact that there is too much of it. And, I have a theory here, and I speak a lot in workshops on leadership. I say, you love mangoes. How many mangoes can you eat? You can't eat 62 mangoes in one go. You cannot have so much cricket. Even if you love the game, you will stop watching it after a point of time. And even Test cricket. I mean, there is much more Test cricket played today than before, which is still acceptable because we want them to play. At least cricket lovers love that. And nobody seems to be worried about the players' burnout or anything, because now they have backup teams. Countries like India have 3 teams ready to play almost. New Zealand has 2 teams, it seems to me, at the Test level, because 6 players were changed for the second Test against England. And New Zealand won the second Test with that extra 6 new players. Also, I think one-day teams and T20 teams, you have specialists, could be about 50 players playing for a country at one time, 40 to 50 players at one time. Still, there's too much of the game. Is anyone going to bring back that soul and understand that the law of marginal utility should be applied and we shouldn't have too much of the game? Is that possible?
Well, I think the only thing that would save it is to become more realistic with what players are paid. And you've got to remember too that the top 20 are gobbling up most of the money. And, those below that level in A teams and playing first-class cricket in their countries and that tend to be getting the dregs. So the gap between the so-called rich and the poor in cricket is very marked also. So I think they need to sort that side of it out. I'm not suggesting that players shouldn't be able to make a living out of playing the game, but throwing millions of dollars at young men is a disaster for them as well as everybody else. So I can't see things changing soon enough. But as you've just pointed out, one point I would pick up on, though, I don't accept that there's too much, there's too much cricket generally, I think. Yes, but I take my mind back to the days of playing county cricket and 7 days a week. After about 20 days, you might get 3 days off, and that would go for 5.5 months. And you got in the groove of it, and you were fine. And the bowlers were the same. And I thought, and this is one of the other aspects that I think is risky, is that if you keep resting players, and we see what's just happened, and I know we're going to talk about the final in a moment or two, but what we've already seen there is players playing in the IPL and then expect to come across, have a few nets, and walk straight into a test match. Now, from a fitness point of view, it's high risk, especially for bowlers. The risk of them breaking down is greater at the start of the season when they begin. Well, what we're seeing now is they're having to make several starts during a season. And I can imagine what's happened to some of the New Zealand bowlers in that first test. They rested them for the second test. I mean, ideally, you wanted them to play both, but I bet you they're stiff and sore, and one or two of them, I wouldn't be surprised if they've got niggles. So I'm a great believer in, sure, have a break during the year, and you might have a month off the game. But once you start playing it, keep playing it, and keep that fitness up. And you don't have to go to the gym to keep fit. You just have to score more runs or bowl more overs. So I may be accused of being old school, but I'm trying to make some sense out of it. And I see that expression often is used more as a put down than anything else, and I won't have it.
No, Glenn, your views are very, very right. I totally agree with you, because I remember, and county cricket went on, and it still does, and players never really had a break. You rightly said maybe 3 days break after 20 days, and this went on for 5.5 months. And I know that you were the leading scorer in county cricket many a time, and you were really prolific. But that means that batsmen and bowlers who are in the groove need to keep playing, but they need to be managed in a way that it's sensible. And they're playing test cricket, they're playing 3-day cricket. That's one way of playing cricket. But then, as you said, playing 20-20 and then coming straight to a test match is not the way to, because you're bowling 4 overs with 1 over spells, and suddenly in a test match you're bowling a 6-over spell and bowling 24 overs in a day. So it's really, really different. But I want to now switch over to the World Test Championship, and we'll come back to some general stuff later. So India versus New Zealand, and it's a wonderful occasion. It's the first final as such, although we've had the World Test Championship points earlier as well. And New Zealand and India both have done very well to reach the final. I think New Zealand's captain, Kane Williamson, is a very impressive individual. Very, very, in India we say Tehrav, which means stability in the mind, which means he's a balanced individual, and what a skillful player. Then Virat Kohli over there, aggressive and as an individual, though he's calmed down a bit after getting married, if I can say so. But he's also, a great leader and a very, very good batsman also. So let's talk about the two skippers first, Glenn.
You say that Kohli has calmed down. Are you talking in terms of the runs that he's scoring, or his everyday life, or because I have noticed that he's had a bit of a lean trot for a while, and
that's right.
And actually, I sent out a questionnaire by one of your journalists in India, and he was suggesting that maybe his reactions have slowed, etc., etc. And I said, well, I'm not going to go down that path and suggest that that's the case, because he's still obviously very fit man, and he's not that old, etc., etc. He's having a lean trot, as everyone does from time to time. So yeah, obviously if he gets in, he's going to be a dangerous player, and the same, as you quite rightly say, with Williamson. Now Williamson, yes, he's a very stable sort of individual, which you've outlined there. And as a consequence, his decision-making at the crease is very good. And that helps your longevity at the crease. And he also is able to concentrate for long periods of time, which means you don't just get hundreds, you can get big hundreds, and you can get them often. But he's a balanced individual, and that's great to see, because I see a lot of what I think you say in India, shosha, with what goes on out in the middle there. I mean, a wicket is taken, and you'd have thought it was the 10th wicket, and the side had just won the match, and they still have 9 wickets to take. You get such a change in the approach to the game, with things like going out onto the field and then standing there as a group and having a final team talk. Well, you've just spent days in the same hotel, you've been to the same practices, you get to the ground an hour and a half before the match, when you can have lots of team talks and final ones in the dressing room. But of course, now they want to be seen to be doing it. It's almost as though it's, as I say, it comes back to a bit of shosha. What on earth could they be talking about that's of any value whatsoever?
Yeah.
And I just, and the humility side of it has been cast aside. And you've been told that you must, by agents, etc., that you must show more emotion. Well, okay, if that's natural to you, so be it. But it seems to me that there's a lot of cloning has taken place. But to come back to your original question and talking about the 2 captains, I think we've probably covered that. But except to say that Williamson is struggling a little bit there, obviously with his elbow problem returning. He missed out on the first test, so he hasn't had many runs in the middle, as many of them would be in that category. So he's not really, I imagine, as prepared as he would like to be. But the same can be said for Kohli and the Indian players. I believe that they've arrived in Southampton and that they're playing some sort of match in the middle against each other. Because they must have enough players there to do that. But prior to that, they were just practicing in the nets. And there's no substitute for competitive play in the middle. So New Zealand have got to be better prepared than India because of these 2 test matches. But really, for such an occasion as this, a World Cup or World Test final, the preparation has been largely ignored, and I don't think that has helped the importance of the occasion. We're all trying to get up with it and thinking, oh, we can't wait for this to happen, and it'll be great to see what comes out of it, and whoever wins this is going to be seen as the top team in world cricket, etc. And you think, well, the way that they went about the nominations or who gets through to the final was a shambles as well. They were supposed to play 3 matches away and 3 at home that counted. There were other series going on at the time that didn't count. If you had a series that only had 2 matches in it, it counted for as many points as a series with 5 matches in it. To me, the organisation of it was a shambles. And that's sad, because the build-up to this could have been better than the preparation and the legislation that was put in place to find out who the 2 best teams were. And once again, I keep using that word, I suppose. I'm sad about that.
Yeah. I can see that, Glenn, and you're right. The preparation is not ideal. The format was not ideal, and even perhaps a three-test series might have been a better decider. I mean, why only one test match? But that is another thought that I'll plant with you. But I'm going to ask you now to just compare the two batting lineups roughly, not going into each individual. So we have on the New Zealand side, we obviously have Latham and we have Nichols, and BJ Watling is still playing well. And the two biggies, that's Ross Taylor and Williamson. So versus Rohit Sharma and the newcomer Shubman Gill. Then we have Virat Kohli, Pujara, Rahane, and Rishabh Pant, who's in blistering form in tests as well. So these batting lineups look pretty impressive, both of them.
Yes, they do, if they're in form. And I think we've probably talked, or I've talked enough about the lack of opportunity to get into form. Now, you say Punt, for example, is in marvellous form at the moment in Test cricket, but when did he last play the Test?
Yeah.
I mean, you're only as good as your last innings, and so I feel sorry for him and others because of that. But I must just say something about his efforts in that final Test in Australia. And I really enjoyed that. And I watched just about every ball of that. Pujara set it up initially by just batting as long as he did. And they were bombing him all the time. That's the expression used for bouncers these days, isn't it? Bombing. And I couldn't understand why the umpires couldn't have done something about that. It became, it wasn't good viewing. I thought it was a return of what we saw way back, in the Bodyline series and so on. And it was being allowed to happen. And in that middle session on the last day, they just kept doing it. Pujara, I think, was hit 11 times, 3 times on the head. And the courage that he showed was something else. And then to Punt to come in and cash in on that, but also overcoming everything the Australians had to throw at him. And I thought justice was served in that game when India beat that sort of tactics, or those sorts of tactics that Australia resorted to. So I was delighted with the result. Now, coming back to this one that's coming up, with the New Zealanders, for example, it looks as though Conway has got to open.
Conway is doing very well.
That must happen, obviously, with his double hundred and so on. Latham has got a good record, so that's good to see. You mentioned quite early, Will Young, who's just come in this second Test and has been playing in county cricket and scoring big there so far. So he may well need to play. I'm just not sure whether it's another point. Selection has been taken over by senior players, and whether they like it or not, they're bound to look after their mates to some extent. So that you have that conflict of interest, and therefore seniority in teams sometimes gets the nod over a younger player who ought to be there anyway, and isn't.
Right.
And that could happen to the likes of a Will Young. As far as Ross Taylor is concerned, he's got an 80, of course, and in that second innings, which will help him. And I think after everything he's done and the fact that he's shown some form, I think he ought to be there. You mentioned Henry Nichols. He's an interesting one. Someone who frustrates oppositions because he's not orthodox. You wonder at times how on earth he's still there. He can be dropped 2 or 3 times. It doesn't faze him. He's got a lot of guts. He's got a determination as well, and he gets the most out of the ability that he has.
Yeah.
And because of that, he's successful, believe it or not.
That's right.
And then we come on to Now Tom Blundell is probably going to keep, I think, because Watling, as you quite rightly said earlier, has been remarkably successful. Another hard worker on the game, keeping wise, adequate, but of course he's been out of it and he's announced that he's retiring at the end of this one.
Yes.
And he's, he didn't score in the first one. He's got a back problem at the moment. Can they really risk bringing him in? Blundell has shown another determined sort of player who gets the best out of his ability, keeps adequately. So, he will probably play, I think. So that gives a bit of depth. Where New Zealand comes into a bit of a problem is that with their bowlers, not many of them you could put in the all-round category. No. And I don't think Santner will play. It looks as though Patel is likely to. He's not really a batsman. Henry is marginal, even though he's just got the man of the match in this second test.
He bowled very well. Good swing bowler.
Yes, he moves it away from the right-hander really nicely. He played a bit of county cricket last year for Worcestershire. But he's obviously in some sort of form, done very well. I don't know if there's a place for him, but he can hold a bat. So he gives them a little bit further down there. And then, of course, you've got the likes of Bolt, who can't really bat his eyelids.
Can't bat, but he can bowl.
Yes, he can bowl, yes. And then Southey can hold a bat too, but prefers not to. He's been a frustration because I know he can bat a bit, but he doesn't like to work on it. But he might well have to do something. So, I mean, Jameson, well, yes, I should have mentioned him earlier from a batting point of view because he can play.
He can play.
He's still a relative novice. He probably doesn't quite know his game that well yet, but is a talent with the bat. So that might give him the nod if they just play three seamers and then they play, Patel as the spinner. Leaves them a little bit light, I suppose. So who's going to miss that? I'm not sure there.
I think they might even play four pacers, it looks like, because Southampton seems to be, the curator is saying, bouncy pitch coming up, and and obviously the spinners are not as good as India's spinners. So maybe they will bank on their four fast bowlers. That also could happen. But just, Glenn, want you to compare the New Zealand bowling attack with the Indian bowling attack of Ishant Sharma, Bumrah and Shami. These three look like they're going to be the pace bowlers for India. And then Ashwin and Jadeja might both play, even though they're both spinners. And we're playing a test match in England, but they might both play. Jadeja is probably one of the best all-rounders in the world today. And his fielding alone is electrifying. He saves a lot of runs even in a test match. That is vital. And Ashwin is actually at his peak again. So how do you compare the two bowling attacks?
Yes, for me, the conditions could well decide the match. If the ball swings, if the ball seams, then the New Zealand bowlers have had the advantage over the Indian batsmen. Well, they showed that in New Zealand, the last tour that they had there. And as we know, Southey, who appeared to be over the hill going back 18 months or so, has shown that that is not the case. He's a real swing bowler. Bolt swings it very well also. The Indian attack, well, Shami swings it away quite nicely. So he comes into that category, I think. Ishant Sharma tends to be more a seamer, I think it's fair to say, than a swing bowler. Yeah. Tall lad, so he gets good bounce. Yes. I think
Bumrah is the X factor. I don't know what he's going to do.
Bumrah, what they call now a heavy bowl's a heavy ball. I thought it was 5.5 ounces. We used to say he hits the bat hard.
Yeah.
And, he's got that sort of pace. and he'll keep bowling and bowling and bowling. So he's a very useful performer too. So there's not a lot in it, but the New Zealand batsman, as long as it doesn't turn, then I think if the conditions help swing and seam, that they may well come out on top because of that. Having said that, Ashwin can bowl under any conditions.
Yeah.
He's got enough variation, and I still think that he would trouble the New Zealand batsman under any conditions. As you quite rightly say, with Jadeja, his ability as an all-rounder is unquestionable, and obviously even add fielding to that, which you've already done. He tends to me to be very accurate and a very good limited overs bowler. And when the conditions are not turning, he seems to settle for bowling very tightly and pegging a batsman down and hoping that they're going to make an error of judgment. Whereas I feel that with Ashwin, he's got more variations. And he seems to be a determined character who can more than hold a bat as well.
Yes,
so he's a good cricketer. Yeah. So I think conditions for me are going to play a major role in who might have the edge.
Absolutely, Glenn. I totally agree with you. Two largely evenly matched sides, good batting and good bowling attacks, good fielding all round, great captains and players at the helm. The conditions would definitely play a key role. Perhaps the toss may play a key role. We don't know what's coming up in that final, and hopefully we will have 5 days of cricket, because England being England, even that sometimes becomes a problem. And I believe if it's a draw or a tie, they're going to share the trophy. So, but I think every cricket lover would want the test match to be decided and for it to be won fair and square with no controversies and no other problems occurring. But after that, India have a tough tour of England with 5 test matches. It's a full test series. And New Zealand, I've not been following where they're going after that. They obviously go back to a lot of cricket as well. But as you said, it's a roller coaster, isn't it? We might even forget the World Test Championship final within 3 months and something else is taking place. What do you say?
Yeah, well, it sounds as though the IPL is going to be continued in September, isn't it, in the Middle East?
Yes.
Well, I don't know how that's going to affect New Zealand's program in particular, because they've got a full program coming up. I don't know about other countries. Now, are those players committed to go back to their IPL teams and walk away from test matches with their national side? Now, I don't mind. I think every player has the right to choose. But what's happening at the moment is they're getting 12-month contracts with their national teams and then able to have the flexibility and freedom to duck off to these 20-over leagues. Yeah. And it's just all about administrations backing off because they don't want to upset players. And so because they don't want players pulling out or pulling the plug on their national sides, but it's short-term thinking. And as you quite rightly said earlier, most countries now, and India and New Zealand in particular, have got backup players who are more than half decent and could follow on and do the job. So, yeah, I think with contracts, they've got to tighten up on those and say, okay, you're entitled to go and play in these leagues if you want to. And maybe when it comes to some test matches, they can make themselves available and can be selected on that basis or not. And I think that would make the whole thing, it would tighten things up and become far more realistic and still allow the freedom of individuals to choose, which they have the right to do.
Absolutely, Glenn. In fact, it's fascinating to hear your views, and you are such an analyst and lover of the game so many years after having retired from active playing days, and then, of course, your selection days, in your administration days, and your coaching days. You've been writing about the game. I want you to just talk for a couple of minutes before we close to youngsters. What should a young cricketer or even a young sports person look forward to going forward? What are the basics that youngster should focus upon, not technically, but perhaps in the mind?
Well, it's hard for them at the moment. They're being misled. I've had a little bit to do in little old Wanaka here with a population of about 9,000 people. I got rung up a few months ago if I would just have a word to and have a look at some of the under 11 players. So, well, these kids were either 10 or 11 of age, actually. And naturally, they've been watching so much of the 20 over stuff, and they just want to whack the ball. Every ball that's bowled, they want to attack it.
And they want to hit it over there, lap shots, terrible.
Well, yes, those too, yes. Well, reverse sweeps or laps or whatever you want to call them. What's the one that they do that with over there? Yeah, and here I am, this old guy talking to them and saying, well, what you really should be looking at is playing with a full blade and trying to stay at the crease as long as you can as a batsman. I want, like you bowlers, to come up and bowl to hit the top of off stump or try and get it right up in the block hole so the batsman misses and you knock his castle over, and be happy to come up and get some consistency, and the other thing I push with them is that remember that your opposition, if they were not there, you would have no game of cricket. So forget about the sledging and abuse and have respect for your opponent. And even if they start up mouthing off, don't fall into the trap of following suit, because you then are just as bad as they are. But remember, without them, there is no game. So that's the sort of stuff that I'm trying to put across to the young kids. It's quite a battle, I think. and they want to follow, what they see with their heroes and so on. And, oh, yeah.
But Glenn, your words, your inspiration will definitely make a dent, and some of us are doing our own bit with the same ideas. I also wrote an email to the board in India saying under 22 players should not be playing 20 overs at all. And this was a couple of years ago, but nobody listens to me. And all the 19-year-olds are doing pretty well in 20 overs cricket. I don't think they can hit a straight drive, but they can definitely hit a lap shot for 6 behind the wicket keeper. Can't help it.
Yes, well, of course, my view is if you resort to that, then it shows that you can't bat. And if you spent as much time practicing that by playing with a full blade, you would be even more successful.
Absolutely correct, because this is the more difficult shot. The contact time is so little, and the face you're presenting is. So I know a little bit of cricket myself, as you know. So Glenn, but it's been a wonderful conversation. We've spoken only about cricket. We left out music and culture and food and Punjab this time. But I know that you love Punjab and India, and we look forward to having you here soon. And maybe we'll also have you here and see some of your own shoshas, as you said. So looking forward to that.
Well, I look forward to some Ali gobi mutter and or some tandoori chicken. Those are the sorts. I like chawal as well. I tend to, unlike you Punjabis, who either have rice or have your rotis, but not both. I like both, actually. So,
yeah. No, I like both too. I have both too. I have one roti and a bit of rice. That's my normal meal.
Yes. Well, this Guru Sahib enjoys his Indian food, his Indian khana.
Absolutely, Glenn, you do. And we enjoy your conversations and your presence in our Playwrite Foundation conversations. It's a wonderful pleasure to have you again, and great views, important for the world of cricket. We shall share this video with a lot of connoisseurs and youngsters. I'm sure you will do something there and share it with your friends. And thank you for joining us, Glenn. I know it's late at, not late, but it is night time. And but it was very sweet of you to take out time for us. Thanks once again.
And I look forward to having some Indian Kana with you one day.
You will, Glenn. You will. I look forward to seeing you.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Goodbye.